I won't get into it right now, but I'm at a... I wouldn't say major. I think my mind is making it major. My heart is making it major. It feels major, but I'm at a crossroads. I don't know what size it is right now. That's what I'm trying to figure out. I'm at a crossroads on what I want to do with a specific idea or project. Whether I want to talk about it or not, or keep it to myself, I'm not sure at the moment. But I'm going to figure it out. But today, what is pulling me the most is to try and finish talking about Metroid. Metroid, the third half. I know that doesn't mathematically make sense, but that's what I'm going with. That's what I'm going to name it. Metroid, the third half. And, speaking of, threes and third halves and stuff like that, Metroid Prime 3. That is where I left off yesterday, and that is where I'm going to continue today. Let me see, I wrote down, let me pull up my sticky notes again. I start recording, and I haven't gotten my things going. Alright. Me think. Can... scroll down. Don't tell me you lost my notes. Thank you. Am I done talking about Metroid music? No, not really. When I get to Hunters, I'll need that to remind me. Ugh. And Dread a little bit as well. Prime 4. Yeah, I'll keep that on my thing. Oh, I talked about baggy Metroids, though. Those ones that kind of are stuck to the ground and kind of in the concept art, but it never got used. That made me sad. That made me very, very sad. So many good... There's so much amazing concept art for Metroid Prime. Really, just leaning into that, like... Alien, not Alien in the movie, just Alien in a general sense. That just unusual, weird to look at, surreal art. And I feel like rarely ever does all of that get put into the games. It makes me sad. There's so many good designs, so many good sketches. I wish they would just include them all in a responsible way that keeps the game whole and functional. But, so much amazing concept art. And I wish that all of it got used for something. Just thinking through. Ugh. Can Metroid 5 just be Metroid 1.5? Can we do that? They got the design documents. They've got the idea. Expand it a little bit. So something more, like whole. Can we do that? I wouldn't mind. I really don't want... I want Prime 5 to be like what Prime 2 is to Prime 1. Loose connections that aren't trying to be some big, like, overarching narrative. Prime 2, besides Dark Samus and a bit of Phazon, really is its own self-contained story. And could we have that for Prime 5? I don't want the sequel I don't want the direct sequel to Prime 4, if that makes sense. I want how Prime 2 was to Prime 1. Not how Prime 3 is to Prime 2. I could go for that. I love it. Just lean into that pulp science fiction feeling. That just, like, on the edge of overbearingly alien stories. And just, like, weird scenarios. Please don't just write part 2 of the Silux trilogy. I mean, if there's a Prime 5, if it works, it works. Whatever it is, if they can find a way. But as far as I know what I want, just off the top of my mind, even if Prime 5 is, like, part 2 of the Silux saga... The Silux saga, even if it's that, and it's good, I'm still gonna one day want a Prime again. That is its own self-contained narrative. that doesn't try to be a part of some greater whole. I could really go for that, honestly. But anyway, um, okay. Here's all the notes I wrote down about Prime 3. The first stuff is the gameplay, which before I talk about gameplay, I want to talk about art design. Prime 3, and I think Prime 4 is a much better balance of what Prime 3 was going for, along with the music. Prime 3's art style leaned way more into, I would describe as like garish a lot of the time. Suit designs and like colors. Something that's very immediately noticeable about Prime 3 is how saturated the game is. Like, for real. The game is very saturated compared to not like what's it called? Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity. Not like that saturated, like a Skittles vomit bath from like every character, every movement, but it's can you tell I do not I don't really like Age of Calamity's art direction. For me, it's just so hyper saturated. I feel disgusting just looking at it. But Prime 1 Remastered, actually, is that perfect sweet spot of color and that more naturalistic lighting, more desaturated, but with enough color to really make things pop and stand out. But Prime 3, one of the things that stands out to me, especially when you get certain beam types, is just how like saturated, candy colored a lot of attacks, environments, bosses, abilities, environments that just how candy colored and strong that they are. And I know I've talked about before liking that sort of merchandisable candy color, but again, that changes depending on the series that we're talking about and the style that it's in. For me, Metroid Prime, like, I have a limit, especially if it's the whole environment and it's just nothing but just oversaturated, constant, like, vibrant, popping, like, overly vibrant and popping colors. You know, within measure, within reason, to make certain things stand out, and, you know, not like everything. You know, there's some areas where there is muted colors, more naturalistic tones, but Prime 3 leans way more into... Let me find some screenshots so I can maybe, like, articulate it more. Metroid Prime 3. Metroid Prime 3. No. Okay. Gameplay. There we go. It's just got these, like, very strong tart candy colors. And it's always... Like, there are instances, especially earlier on in the game, where it's more toned down. But, like, looking at, like, Dark Samus and some of the environments, the colors are a little blown out. Just kind of, like, overly bright, overly poppy. Some of the beams are just, like, overly green, overly blue. It's... I see some gameplay here of, like, Prime Remastered, and that is, like, the perfect balance of... You got a screenshot here of, like, the opening area, and, like, the green hues, the way they reflect, and, like, the subtler colors. something for me that just appeals a lot better than how bright Prime 3 can get a lot of the time. Now, one thing moving away from just how bright and super vibrant the colors can be in Prime 3 is the art design, which I feel like when I look at Prime 3, it has some of the strongest art design out of the Prime games. They really put in the effort to realize everything as much as they possibly could. And there are times when those vibrant colors mix really well with the architecture and the design, but there's just a bit too much of just gray and then super vibrant bright red and green and like what's the word, super saturation. But Prime 4 and Prime Remastered, I feel really hit that right balance of amount of color saturation and mixing it with realizing the concept art and the world design, architecture, creature design. But sometimes Prime 3 is, along with the music, as I said, is a little garish to look at. Like this screenshot of Samus inside of her ship, and her suit is like this overly bright orange, super duper. Like, it makes it feel more like Star Wars The Clone Wars. Or, I know even Star Wars The Clone Wars' style was more muted than that, but how do I get that feeling across? Like, Saturday morning cartoon feeling. It's art direction that steers away from the more naturalistic. Now, there are some really good looking environments. I'm looking at here, there's like the spiky like spore plants, and and like a lot of the environments there are quite a few that have more like naturalistic colors and are more immersive in that way, naturalistically speaking. But there are a lot of areas in Prime 3 that are just bathed in like candy tones and super bright lighting. And even a lot of the enemy design as well. I love the amount of enemy variety in Prime 3. That's really good. Like, the sheer amount of... But in Prime 3, everything is so easy. It kind of negates just... Prime 3 has its own mess of contradictions and parts that don't line up quite well, or, work in one way but then don't work in the other, or, is good on paper and then you apply another system to it and then it kind of negates the whole thing. But, like, as I look at all these screenshots and remembering my time with Prime 3 and even watching through gameplay as well of Prime 3 just to refresh myself, just, for me, slightly too saturated in a lot of places. Not overall. It's not like Age of Calamity for me, where the whole game is just, I don't want to look at this for long periods of time. It's just super bright over, but a lot more than to my preference. Prime 3 feels a lot more plasticky and action figure-y, kind of Buzz Lightyear Star Command. I know that's not a great comparison either, but I'm trying to list things around an idea. around what I'm going for, which is that kind of action figure plastic feeling Prime 3 sort of has, a sort of sheen over it that makes it feel a lot more artificial than Prime 1 and Prime 2. It's not even the whole game necessarily, but a lot of it makes it feel... It makes me happy that they leaned into more of the alien and more alien architecture, more interesting environments after Prime 2. It has a lot of elements of the direction that I would have wanted Prime 2 to go in with its different areas. But the main thing really for me is just how consistently the colors are like apple, like red apple, blueberry blast, cranberry, lime, lime sparkle, something like that. It's just a little too much, a little too saturated. But even that's something that can easily be fixed with like a mod or something like that. It has that feeling of the colors of like a Jak and Daxter game or an older Ratchet and Clank or a Sly Cooper, like Sly Cooper 1 through 3. It has those kinds of colors to it. Not nearly as saturated as Other M is, but just for what the Prime series goes for, I'm gonna say the color works for Other M. Like, Other M's coloring works for what it is. But for Prime 3 and what Prime is, ugh. I'm sorry, I'm looking at a screenshot of and watching through a video of that scene where Samus takes off her helmet and barfs out Phazon, and just, jeez. Her suit is so saturated red with these like blue it's so and then I'm looking at like a screenshot here of Prime 1 and Prime 2 and the lighting on the suit, and just like it just here's the thing for me. When you do something like that, when you oversaturate it, and when it's in a certain perspective, in a certain view, and you're trying to get me to feel a certain way about the world, that kind of oversaturation, for me, it takes me out of the immersion. My mind is overly occupied with how bright and vibrant the colors are. Whereas the balance that Prime 1 and 2 strike, and the really good balance that Prime 4 and Prime Remastered strikes, is having colors that pop, but allowing them to sit in the environment and sort of speak for themselves, not drawing attention to themselves. It's based more on how the environment interacts with the suit and the lighting. And this goes even for Prime 1, back on the GameCube. It's the way the lighting bounces off the environment, the way that the different sources interact, and the way vibrancy is created, which is different from just taking something at its base and just dropping vibrancy on it, no matter what scenario or situation you're in. And it's just like overly super saturated, I like it when saturation is called for, justified by the environment itself, if that makes sense. that gives you the incentive to put more into the environment in terms of lighting and creative ways of creating those vibrancies naturalistically. But in Prime 3, you've got vibrant, saturated, candy colored characters, and you have saturated environments, saturated attacks, saturated enemies. Again, it's not 100% of them, but it's a pretty big number. It's a pretty significant number of the environments and the the different aspects of the game, different parts of it. Enough to stand out to me and just fall out of the range of how appealing I find it. And just going with a little bit how over-designed the PED suit is. There's Prime 3, the best way I can put it is that Prime 3's main weakness is excess. It's a lack of restraint. That is the best way I could put Prime 3's just visual and gameplay and story, and it's sort of the opposite issue of what Prime 4 is. Prime 4 is really vapid and empty, underdesigned, underutilized. Nothing quite fits together very well. But Prime 3 has this other... It goes in the opposite direction, where it's trying to be so much at once. It's trying to design so much. It's trying to fill the environment with so much. It's trying to make the characters look like so much. It's trying to have the story be so much all at once. But it's a lot to the game's detriment. And there's this sort of peeking in of almost like superhero feel to it. Just the way Gore is like Iceman, and he's like shooting and making ice trails and surfing around and saying justice and fighting for what's right and all that. Yeah, it's not the exact line, I know. Justice will prevail, that kind of thing. And Gendrada, she's like the shapeshifter. It's Gore's like the cyborg. It feels so... There's a lot of gimmicks in Prime 3. A lot of gimmicky elements, a lot of gimmicky characters, a lot of gimmicky set pieces, a lot of gimmicky environments, gimmicky fights. It's very action figure like. It's very, in a way, it's kind of Marvel like, but not in the way Marvel like means now. It's Marvel like in the way superheroes and Marvel used to mean then, if that makes sense. Like I guess another good comparison I could sort of make is like Ben 10. That also has aliens, but the same kind of color thing I'm talking about, and gimmicky abilities, sort of gimmicky characters. It strikes a balance better in terms of introducing those elements than Prime 4 does in a lot of ways. Not every way. In terms of involving characters, it does a lot better than Prime 4 does. But the thing is like, they're not... It's like the weakest part is the other bounty hunters. They're not particularly well written. They're not poorly written, but they're not well written. They're just there. If you're especially easy at being made to feel emotions, if like if a music cue plays or someone says like we're friends and that's the only thing you get from them, the bounty hunters are so surface level, but that it doesn't really, like Gore's death when Dark Samus uses his powers against him and he gets impaled on that ice spike. I'm not sad really about Gore. There's the idea of Gore. There's the idea of him reaching out for help. There's the idea of the empathy in that. But really, it's really just like, it's sad that a character died. Death is sad, but it could really be anyone else. It doesn't have to be Gore. You replace his design with anyone else. You replace him with a Federation trooper. That's the thing about like Prime 3. It's like I don't really care about the bounty hunters. There's the idea of tragedy to them. There's the idea of sadness. But emotional connection and story doesn't just... It's not just the idea of something bad happening to someone. Or sad. And you have to build that empathy. It's the same reason, you can hear about a celebrity you've never really, followed, or someone on the news, you hear that they passed away, and you're not, antisocial or a sociopath if you don't feel anything for them. You just have no context. You have no connection. You have no information. These things, it's like hearing someone else's pet died or something like that, and then experiencing the loss of your own. And it goes from information to experience. Character, just the fact that something negative happened to someone does not entitle them necessarily to a reaction, if that makes sense. That's not against reaching out and having empathy. I'm talking more of like, literally there's nothing you can do. I think everyone hopes that in some level, even if someone doesn't know them, that they would reach out their hand and offer them help or support or someone to interact with or talk to, that kind of thing. I've discussed that before apart from Metroid. I think it's completely okay to hope for that, and it's all right to reach out to someone you don't know or give them your condolences. But there's a difference between that and having more information versus hearing about it from like a distant source or someone who lives in a completely different state. You know what I mean? A different country. There's that level of just like, what are you even supposed to do about that? There's nothing you can do. And this is different from, there's a certain finality to it when it's death versus when it's I'm in trouble, but there's a chance I could be saved, or there's a chance to help someone. When people do reach out after a death, it's condolences to the family who are still alive, and the fact that they're left alone. But in terms of the person who actually died, oh, I love you, Junuma. That's information. You didn't really know that person, so you feel empathy for what there is to feel empathy with, which is, who's left, the family, the children. You send them help, you send them condolences, and it's the same, I think, with real life in a lot of ways. You know, you see someone asking for help, you hear them talking about their dire situation, abuse or you know, abandonment, or being forced to take up a lot of responsibility. I'm not even talking about myself. I'm talking about someone else that I saw the other day who who you know has an who also like dealt with this kind of abusive stuff. They've got their own situation though. They've got siblings that they have to take care of. They've got like what's the word? Let me think. Like super de duper like poor living conditions, which exacerbates like health problems, which, you know, also like super duper chronic health problems, you know, that kind of thing. And you know, thankfully that person got a lot of help and a lot of assistance. It's because you feel empathy for the living. It's who's there to feel empathy for. But in fiction, death is meaningless. Death really does not mean anything. Just killing a character is pretty pointless. Like, death is sad, but death is muted in a fictional world. There's a reason the greatest character deaths... there's a reason the most impactful character deaths come from characters who lived. If that makes sense. Who you got to see live, who you got to see experience, who you got to know personally, but like, in Metroid Prime 3, I don't care. I don't care that Gore... I really don't care that Gore specifically died. It's sad to see death. It's sad to see the idea of his death. But it's surface level at best. There's really not much going on there. I mean, if you want something from Metroid that has a bit more of that depth to it in terms of deaths, you know, look at Grey Voice or Old Bird. Even then, like, they're like the medium. Gore and the Bounty Hunters are like on the low end. Grey Voice and Old Bird are more towards the middle of that, you know. But in Metroid, death has always been more of a warning rather than a part of the narrative. You tend to see figures and characters before they've... Well, no. Let me reverse that. You tend to see figures and characters after they've died. You see the Galactic Federation troopers in Prime 2 Echoes. They're already dead, and that's meant as a warning. You see that dead space warrior, possibly trooper, before Kraid's room in Prime, not Prime, in Super Metroid. You see dead space pirates, you know, to warn you of the dangerous conditions and the parasites that are moving around. But these things... How do I say this further? Like, the Galactic Federation troopers in Prime 2 Echoes really have more to them than the bounty hunters do in Prime 3. And you see their deaths... Well, actually, yeah, you literally see their deaths through the camera. That's right. Later on, you actually get to see the recording of the Ing attacking and taking them out. Thank you, Numa. Let's see. You get to literally see when they die to the Ing, as the Ing take over their camp. And the idea of it is disturbing for sure. The there's a certain dreadfulness to it. It's sad to see characters die, but that's not the same as caring about the character. And even then, their deaths, again, are utilized well. Their deaths in Prime 2 are, again, used as a warning to warn you about the incoming Ing. And their deaths are more so to... What's the word? Their deaths are more so to prop up the danger that the enemy presents ahead of you to Samus. Whereas in Prime 3, yes, there's an element of, warning you about Dark Samus. Especially when you see, like, her shadow pop out of them and then they pass away or something like that. But one is it's not really not the same, because in those other instances, they are killed by the alien or the enemy in question, whether it be the Ing or Dark Samus, which is probably why, out of all of the kind of shallow characters that the other bounty hunters are in Prime 3, why Gores stands out the most, because he gets impaled and gored by his own ice spike. He's the only bounty hunter who, breaks out of the control seemingly breaks out of the control for just a second, reaches out his hand, and then Dark Samus takes him out with has him take himself out with his own ability. And that is a very compelling idea. There is the concept, it is tragedy in its most basic sense, but it doesn't last much longer than it's on screen, if that makes sense. It's more like, playing with action figures, and that action figure is officially beat in the story of your mind. It has that kind of tone to it. It's not particularly interesting or mature, but there's something there that could be expounded upon, but it's not something you can really expound upon in Metroid. This is like for a cartoon or a sci-fi show, something Ben 10 like, or Generator Rex, something like that. Transformers animated. That's where the kind of characters that the bounty hunters are best served in. They're kind of... And I haven't even gotten to Prime 4 yet, but really the bounty hunters of Prime 3 really belong and are better serviced in a different kind of story. And that's just kind of a lot of what Prime 3 does, with protecting the bomb missions and introducing all these like objectives that you get in other shooters, and all these elements that they're way better served. They don't belong here, not even intrinsically because of what Metroid has been in the past, but because Metroid does not have the ability to serve it in any meaningful, substantial way. It just becomes a task. There are ways to do the sort of protect the landmark missions, and other games have done it well, but they were also built for that. But Prime the Prime series, it's Prime 3 just has a ton of elements that don't have any fulfillment in Prime. They're just poorly suited to be realized. They're poorly suited to mesh with any of the other stuff that's going on. It's more like taking a break from Metroid to play a different game for like a while. And then that ends and it's like, well, okay, going back to Metroid now. Some things I do like. I don't okay. I don't like how segmented a lot of Prime 3's areas are across the planets, and the whole ship thing and how long it takes to just move between it's very misguided, but it's serviceable. You know, they it still holds on mostly to, you know, Metroid style level design, even though it lets go of a lot of its elements. And I do like the individual stories of each area. I do like how they really leaned into learning about the Chozo of Elysia and the Skytown robots, learning about the Reptilicus, learning about the Seer. She was like a female what was, like, prophetess or something like that, and the Science Lord, the Lord of Science, and them, they get overthrown by the primal magic users, and there's that whole story, and then you have the giant spherical ships way in the background, and they're just looming, and you get to take a view at them and just like, ooh, I wonder what that's about. It's sad you can never go to them, but, you know, like, ooh, what's that about? And or the whole planet where it's like fuel gel, and it's partly has to do with how the Galactic Federation gets fuel to their ships. You know, that's interesting enough. They find ways to make those interesting. There's this particular room in Elysia Skytown where Samus enters into a morph ball, and this sort of metal installation kind of like wraps around her. That always stuck in my mind. Again, there's very gorgeous art design in Prime 3, along with how garish and oversaturated it can be a lot of the time. If there was a Prime 3 remake, I would want them to retool the lighting and the colors quite a bit. But, me think. Like, and Dark Samus, she's not like a particularly compelling villain. It's just, when you... Prime 3 is... It's really trying to break Metroid in almost every aspect. It's trying to bring in aspects that don't mesh well with it, that don't gel well, you know. It has all these feeling elements that feel like the game I'd rather be playing than playing Metroid. If you're not into Metroid, it's like, here, have a quick break and do something that's completely... Maybe that'll keep your attention. And then if you're into Metroid, you're constantly being interrupted from the experience by all this stuff. I do really like the Olympus, that area. I do like how they give you more than you need in order to get to the final area. That is a nice touch. Even though the whole thing is very tedious and requires moving the ship around everywhere. It's just something I would have cut. I get they really wanted the ship. Maybe they didn't have time and they didn't know how to make it work, but I just would have cut that. It's just meh. But with Prime 3, progression's a bit more linear. Combat tries to be more in depth with the Wiimote stuff, using the grapple beam to pull on shields, and getting more free aim. There's a reason why they remastered the whole trilogy onto the Wii. That control scheme just served it a whole lot better than the GameCube controls did. But just in general, Prime 3 it's really strong in some ways, but in a lot of ways it's pretty weak. It's playing with a lot of elements that don't really evolve Metroid. They're just new to Metroid, but it's kind of new in the sense that you go to an Italian restaurant and then someone tells them to start serving Chinese, you know? It doesn't really meld well with the rest of the cuisine, and it's certainly new, you know? It certainly is new, but it's... maybe there's a better food to pick. You know, you get the point. Find a better food that doesn't quite mix with the cuisine of another place. And, like, yeah, it's new. It's not really evolving the restaurant or pushing it to a new direction or evolving it or developing it. But it's certainly new elements. You know, you go to an Italian restaurant and you bring a taco stand in there. Like, certainly that is a new element. Just thinking about something really quick. There's thinking about someone who had a really funny wording I thought about the other day. Okay, sorry. Just reminded me of something that had a similar analogy, but I already pretty much used it. Just trying to see if there was a better way to word it. But yeah, you know, you go there and it's like, it certainly is a new thing. You know, I brought an ice cream truck. I brought, you know, but wouldn't it be better to evolve actual restaurant specific desserts from your own, rather than stinking up the place by not stinking up the place but ruining the aesthetic of the place by just dragging in an ice cream cart from off the street, or you know, that has its place, a place where it looks really good, a place where it works very well. A place where it works very well, a place where it has its function, but it's not in that Italian restaurant. If that makes sense, it's not doing justice to the core experience. It's not evolving it really in any way. It's just introducing unfitting elements that, while certainly new and cool, you get the novelty of having a taco in the Italian restaurant. You know, have some ice cream truck ice cream. It's like, well, you can also find find ways to have the restaurant develop interesting foods to sort of meet more in that direction, but in the unique way that the restaurant does. You don't suddenly force an Italian restaurant. It's like, get your chefs back there to cook me a taco. It's like, it's not on our menu. But we do have other things. And we can even develop meals with some of those core concepts, but we're not going to make you a taco. Or ice cream truck ice cream. But what we do have in an Italian restaurant, we got gelato. And, you know, in-house desserts, and we can even experiment and develop flavors using what we have in-house. But I think I'll stop there with that for right now. But the next thing that I'm thinking about is the Aurora unit. I really dislike the Aurora unit. I Every time it contacts Samus, every time it's like, Samus, the warhead has been located. Please return to the GFS Valhalla. And it's like, please be quiet. I don't want to hear you talk anymore. It really does take away, even though Prime 3 has, in the most surface level sense, being, and I think I talked about this last time, a surface level of being alone. It's different being alone inside your house versus being alone on the street, versus being alone in the library, versus being alone in a city you've never been in before. With Prime 3, no matter where you are, you're still under the oversight of the Aurora unit, military computer. And the Federation is like never far away. The Federation, their ships are like in the system. You're never really by yourself. Again, I think I said this earlier. It's like how Mission Impossible does alone. He's still on the comms. Someone could still call. There's assistance. There's a guy waiting on the wings with a helicopter if you need it. And that's something that, for me, always sits in the sidelines in my mind when I'm playing or looking through or just thinking about Prime 3, is that, I'm not the hunter. I'm just a special ops agent in a military operation. And, headquarters is just a little while away. Headquarters isn't that far away. And, at any second, I could get a call from the Aurora unit. Or I could, be summoned back to give a briefing. It's like, that's not, there's like a safety net. There's a fleet-sized safety net right off of planet that I can always check in with at any moment. This is something that I think Dread does a lot better with Adam with. And I'll get to that when I talk about Metroid Dread. But the Aurora unit is just very irritating to me. Listening to it go on and on and on, and it's just like, could you please no longer speak to me? Could you just let me be? Even that amount to me is just irritating to go through. But one character I do really want to talk about, and this character does more than if this character would have died, I would have really been more invested anyway than the bounty hunters, and that would be Castor Dane. I like Castor Dane. Admiral Castor Dane. Castor Dane is one of few, how do I say it, Galactic Federation higher ups we have seen in the series, who treats Samus with complete professionalism and gratitude and seeing her as on equal footing. He treats her very. When you have the comparisons of living Adam Malkovich, that one character at the end of Other M, who's like the corrupt military guy, or you have what's the other guy? There's corrupt admiral in Federation Force, and there's. Who else is super high up? I feel like there's another one. Who was it? No, I guess it really is just Castor Dane, corrupt military guy, living Adam Malkovich. I'm not going to count Adam the computer because he's technically not a Galactic Federation. You know, he doesn't work for them. He's a computer just with Adam's mind. But there's who am I thinking of? Was there someone else? I'm going through Metroid in my mind. Adam Malkovich, corrupt military guy, corrupt admiral guy from Federation Force. Let's see. It's all I can really think of for now. But it's a breath of fresh air to have someone like Castor Dane, who is very professional, very to the point. He takes his job very seriously. He doesn't talk down to Samus ever. And he has like the coolest scene when they're infiltrating the pirate homeworld. And he's like, "Well done, Samus." And he uses his ship to shield himself from the acid rain, and then drops down himself onto the battlefield with flanked by two like bomb squad soldiers. And it's the coolest thing. How about that? And he actually spends like enough time with you throughout the game to sort of be like, you know, Castor Dane, he's reliable. This is a good guy. I actually wrote down a while ago. I wrote down some notes about Dane. Prime 3. Let's see. There we go. Castor Dane. He's one of the many things to like about Prime 3. Prime 3 introduces Admiral Castor Dane. He's just the coolest. There's no subplot of betrayal with him. He's not the stereotypical jerk admiral character that is in everything. He's just super, we couldn't have done it without you. Let's work together. We can push back the enemy. He treats Samus with respect and has 100% confidence in her competence. He's not intrusive at all. And he's always right there, right when you need him to do something. There's a section where he enters the space pirate homeworld, which is perpetually covered in acid rain. He positions his ship under the clouds and then drops down to the surface, using the ship as an umbrella. He doesn't even switch into the acid rain resistant spacesuit. He just keeps wearing his normal spacesuit. He just stays in his admiral uniform and just parks the ship over him and his troops. There's not enough admiral characters who are just cool and do their jobs. I like Castor Dane quite a bit. There's a lot you could cut out about Prime 3 or change or, you know, balance out more. But I would keep Castor Dane the way he is. He's just the right balance of, like, not getting in your way, but also, you know, being reliable. He's one of those characters where that does actually feel like an evolution for Metroid. Not the bounty hunters, not, you know, the other action figure set pieces of Prime 3, but Castor Dane in specific. Not the Aurora units, not, you know, evil laughing Dark Samus. Nothing like that. Just Castor Dane, a really competent soldier. If we could just replace all of the Galactic Federation troopers that are in Prime 4 with just Castor Dane and him helping Samus out, and you know, don't kill him. He's cool, but if you do kill him, I think there would be more emotion behind that. He's just straightforward, to the job, incredibly polite and grateful, but also like stern when he needs to be. He's all these like excellent qualities that really, he's like the ultimate Galactic Federation trooper for Samus to respect and like bounce off of. Can you imagine the two of them just like working together on stuff? Just them two alone, isolated. Like, if you want to give Samus a companion like that, give him to her. give give him Castor Dane that kind of like spotlight, that role, and give Samus someone like that who is super competent and like compliments her, and not like literally compliment, even though he does pay her compliments, like emotionally, physically, mentally, ability wise. I mean, he's not doing backflips and going around, but in terms of like capability wise, you go with a guy like Castor Dane. You don't go creating an Armstrong or a Takabi or Duke, even though Duke is he's not that much better, but he's they're like different flavors of the same drink. You know, like getting flavored water, like different powders, but it's just water. But you know, someone like Castor Dane who's very competent, and you don't make it so that Samus has to wait on him. You find narrative ways to keep him moving along with you. Like, he's the kind of character where if he died, you would really feel the loss of just having that like comrade and compatriot, whatever other word you want to use, and him suddenly just not being there anymore. That would be, you know, if you wanted to go in that direction, he's a perfect example of that. Something to contrast Samus herself and the discipline that she learned while she was in the Galactic Federation Police. A sort of weight of responsibility. But and he would have a ton of responsibility. He's not just like he's not like the soldiers in Prime 4 who the best you get is Duke, who's like who's like, you know, he has responsibility over all the soldiers, but that's very loose. You know, he's sort of like a little loose pack of Galactic Federation troopers. He mainly just commands around Armstrong. That's mainly what he does. But they don't really have a lot of weight resting on them, if that makes sense. If you're not going to give them a lot of like proper time and an emotional weight, it's not them being low-rank soldiers and that Castor Dane would inherently be better because he's a more valuable member of the Galactic Federation Marines. It's because he acts like an admiral. It's because you see him taking on that responsibility, taking on that weight. You could slap the admiral title onto any of the soldiers in Prime 4, and that would not make them any more compelling or interesting. But it's because Castor Dane, 1, is in that position of responsibility, and 2, acts as if he is in that position of responsibility. That right there, for me, is the thread that you evolve from, that you weave something new from. Someone to parallel Samus in that weight that is carried. He has, and imagine all his soldiers die, you know, and he's having to carry on the weight of the responsibility of that of command, but he's staying composed, and he knows that the only way to move forward is to complete the mission, you know, that kind of thing. No tacky self-sacrifice stuff. Just have him die. You know, if he dies, just have him die. Have him get shot. Or like, like, you've got this now, Samus. I'll clear the way so that you can make it to the blah blah blah. No, just have him die in combat. Either fighting alongside Samus or just suddenly encounters the main villain and just like gets it. That's it. No like trying to, because Samus is a super warrior. She doesn't need you to clear the way for her. Samus is a super duper trained, like, fighter with years and years and years and years of experience behind her belt. Like, you get to Dread. That is prime Samus. You get to Dread, and that is prime Samus. She has a lot of experience under her belt. She's trained. She doesn't need you to clear the way. I'll get to you, Prime 4. I'll get to you. She doesn't need you to clear the way for her. Or to, I'll hold him back. You keep going, Samus. you know? She doesn't need anything like that. Fight alongside of her. Get taken out in combat. If Caster Dane were to die, or someone like Caster Dane, that I'm gonna move on. I'm gonna move on from that. Let's see. What's my? Oh yeah, accessibility. Well, I've talked about protecting the bomb. That's dumb. Surface level emotions, I talked about that, and connections. Yeah, I just talked about that. Art design, I talked about that. Accessibility, that's the accessibility paradox. Yeah, just the accessibility paradox of First off, selling Metroid on a console that's supposed to be Blue Ocean to people who wouldn't even pick up Call of Duty or a shooter. And now you're trying to sell the Metroid. First off, trying to sell them, that group, that demographic, Metroid in the first place, the grandmas, the moms, and stuff like that. They're not gonna look for Metroid. And then on top of that, adding in the hyper mode stuff, which just trivializes half the combat. Nothing is balanced around it. Then adding in all of the irritating waggle features that just end up using time. Then adding in all the stuff that depletes difficulty or waters down the experience. But what happens is that, well, guess what? The audience that you were trying to entice and placate to, they're not gonna buy Metroid. So, but you know who is gonna buy Metroid? Metroid's just that kind of series. You can't sell Metroid to the Blue Ocean. It's not going to work. You can't sell Metroid to the Blue Ocean, the grandmas and the grandpas and the moms and the dads who just want to play Wii Fit and Wii Sports, Wii Sports Resort. You're not going to convince them. So then who's left to buy Metroid? Well, people who like and want to play Metroid. And what are they going to get when they finally play it? They're going to get, watered down. They're going to get overly simplified. They're going to get hyper mode that just trivializes all the difficulty. They're going to get irritating, mainstream first-person shooter stuff that just uses up time. They're going to get all the stuff that just isn't complemented by what Prime or Metroid is at all. So now you've messed with the tone, you've messed with the gameplay, to try and sell it to people who aren't going to buy it. And so now the only people left who are going to buy it are the ones who are going to be like, what is this? What did you do? Why would you do that? There are a few elements in Prime 3 that I think are good for the evolution of Metroid. It's not a lot of it. It's not a great amount of what Prime 3 does. It's not a bad game by any means. It has questionable decisions, questionable design choices, questionable in a lot of areas. But questionable can have different degrees of quality to it. And Prime 3 sits around in that, middle space where it doesn't... All of the elements that Prime 3 borrows, it doesn't do particularly well. And because it spends so much time on those borrowed elements, it doesn't do Prime particularly well for the most part. There are exceptions, spots where it gets more into that groove. Again, Skytown kind of comes to mind. The feeling of moving on the rails in Skytown, that is like, and looking down, that they really nailed the feeling of just being suspended over basically an abyss, and just zooming across. Like, it's really disorienting. They did a good job with that. But and they did well enough with the pointer controls. Again, it's like a half and half. It's like not quite all in. Anyway, with Prime 3, it falls into that situation of, you tried to make it for everybody, and now there's, you're trying to sell it to people who never would buy it no matter what, because it looks like sci-fi shooter. And who's left to get it? You know, people who like Metroid, but now it's diluted. So it's this weird. It's that thing of like, who's left for this except someone with tolerance towards it, if that makes sense. It's Anyway, I'm almost done with Prime 3, then I can move on to Hunters, then Dread Prime 4. I'm not sure which order I'll do those in. But, let's see. What do I have here? Bomb missions, surface emotions and connections, Caster Dane, accessibility paradox, art design, or more. Okay, that's done. That's another thing I should talk about really quick. Actually, did I write that down? Let me just write it down just in case. Humor. And that's something I want to talk about really quick, is the weird presence of the Chozo in Metroid. It mainly just happened because we don't get any information on them, but like, you go to Prime 1 and you go to like the Metroid manga, at first it feels like the Chozo are completely extinct. That they're a wiped out civilization, that they're completely gone. Samus is the last memory of the Chozo. But then as you go along, it really just turns out that Chozo aren't extinct so much as most Chozo groups have just retreated, gone elsewhere, or ascended to other planes of reality. In the case of the Talon 4 Chozo, that didn't quite work out for them. But it's interesting to go through. There are multiple tribes of Chozo and groups. You got your Malkin, though that's the warrior ones you see in Dread and Returns. You've got the Toha, which is Grey Voice, and it seems like each group is like has their own thing. So like Malkins, clearly they don't have the inability to fight that the Toha have. And we know the Toha, like Grey Voice and Old Bird, they were Toha. The Toa Nuva. 6 canisters washed up on the beach of Matanui. Anyway, the Toha, there's like different groups of Toha. There was the Toha of SR388. There was the Toha of Zebus? Oh, hold on. Let me double check this. Where did Old Bird and Grey Voice live? That was Zebus, right? I'm pretty sure that was Zebes. Yeah, they lived on Zebes. So you have Oldbird and Grey Voice who live on Zebes. So there are Toha on Zebes, and then there are the Toha on SR388. And I don't know if the Toha of SR388 have the same biological limitations for fighting and violence. Because the Toha of Zebes had basically programmed themselves with the inability to fight or engage in combat any longer. They would go through immense physical pain and even die if they attempted to fight or enact any sort of violence. But even then, there seems to be like differences between them, like the Toha of Zebes. They're way more like, what's the word? More humble living conditions. They just wear basic robes. They've got like mother brain there, and they have some like stuff for genetic engineering, but not to the extent that the Toha of SR388 had, going around creating Metroids and bioengineering and all kinds of stuff, taking control of the EMMI, the Emmys. Like SR388 Toha seem a lot more technologically enabled than the Toha of Zebes, who seem to just live more humble lives and eschew violence, and they still had like their bioengineering technology, but they didn't really seem to use it much. And then you have the Chozo of Skytown Elysia, and they're like robotics. Let me see. I think I wrote down notes of the different Chozo tribes. Ah! I think I did. No, I did not. But the Chozo of Skytown Elysia, their whole thing, rather than bioengineering and stuff like that, where the Chozo, they weren't even Toha. They were just another group, another tribe of Chozo. The Chozo of Skytown Elysia, unlike the Toa, the Malkans, they have their own technology, but it's like combat based. They specialize in like military technologies and weapons and ships and armaments and things like that, and even building their central units, mother brain like machines, to drive information through their systems. They even have like warrior. You can see the statues where you get like the flash shift and the stealth cloak. That they have like their own long history of Malkan warriors. And then the Toha, they have their own history, and the Chozo of Skytown Elysia, they have their own history with their whole thing was more of like astronomy and robots, like specifically specializing in robots. Not in the same way, like the Toha, robots for them are more auxiliary. Their whole thing is more of like bioengineering and engineering different creatures, what's his name? Quiet Robe. Let me make sure his name is Quiet Robe. Quiet Robe. What's his name? Quiet Robe? His name is Quiet Robe. Quiet Robe, like, he hacked the robots, but he didn't necessarily build them. He hacked the EMMI, but didn't necessarily build them. Whereas like the Chozo of Skytown Elysia, their whole thing was astronomy, looking towards the stars and building, specifically like building machines. They really specialized in building machines that would then upgrade themselves, build more machines. They seem to have a really strong grasp of mechanics specifically, their group, and astronomy, looking out towards the stars versus the bioengineering and trying to discover DNA that the Toha have versus the interest in learning new combat technologies and that's the thing, is that the Malkin also had technology regarding like flash shift and stealth cloak. Their whole thing is more like utilitarian type technologies, building defense robots, building technology that allows them to phase between areas, go invisible, detect things. Like I could really see them, and they have their central units. Their whole thing really is more of like utility-based technologies, and doing things like that. Whereas the Toha of Zebes, they've got more of like ruins and culture and more of like stonecraft. They're way less technological than the Toha of SR388, who are doing lots of bioengineering and DNA stuff, though they still dabbled in it. They definitely, I mean, they bioengineered themselves to not even be able to, commit violence or fight. But yeah, the Chozo of Skytown Elite, they got their robots, they got their astronomy, and then the Chozo of Talon 4, their whole thing seemed to be spiritual development, like utilizing their technology to give them time to focus more inward and outward, if that makes sense. Focusing on spiritual pursuits, enlightenment, culture, nature, agriculture. Getting more in touch with their ability to impact reality through physical means. The technology allowing them the space to try and do that. To the point where they practically ascended into another... To the point where they did. They literally ascended into another plane of existence. And I doubt all the Chozo ghosts that we see are every single one of those Chozo. There are probably ones who did manage to ascend into another plane successfully. But the Talon 4 Chozo, their whole thing, they're kind of like the hippie group of the Chozo. Let me look up all planets occupied by Chozo. It's like, there's not one homogenous Chozo group. There are different cultures of Chozo. There are different like groups of Chozo, different cultures. They do different things. Let's see, Zebes, Elysia, SR388, Talon 4, ZDR. Okay, so pretty much everything I've gone through already. So there's like different cultures of Chozo, different groups. They're not just one Chozo race that goes around space. Even the Luminoth, they met their own, another group of Chozo who was going around, doing their things, and the Chozo visited that Brio. Was it Brio? I think it was Brio, where they warned them about mixing technology. They warned them about creating a conflict between science and magic and things like that. But magic, quote unquote magic, as magic is interpreted in that setting. But they're not just one homogenous group, and it made it kind of strange for a while, because like, oh, the Chozo extinct? No, it just turns out one very specific group of Chozo got wiped out by space pirates, and that's what's going on there. Not to mention that the rest of the Toha were wiped out by Ravenbeak. So half the Toha tribe is basically extinct. They're gone. They've completely perished. The Toha have perished. Between space pirates on one part of them and Ravenbeak finishing off the rest. It's also kind of funny to imagine just how, like, Samus could have been running into Chozo the entire time. It's kind of funny to imagine like, as soon as, like, how long ago even did Ravenbeak wipe out the rest of the Toha? He did that, and then he left to go prepare. He comes back, and Samus has killed all the Metroids. So it's like the timeline on it is kind of strange in regards to, like, no, there were Toha, there were Chozo left that Samus could have been interacting with or talking to the entire time. They've only recently died. Oh, now the Malkin are dead. The X-Parasites took care of them. So that's two. The Talon 4 Chozo either got, like, the Talon 4 Chozo, they ascended into another plane of reality, so they're gone. The Malkin got eradicated by the X-Parasites, and the Toha, part of them was killed by space pirates, and the other part was killed off the rest by Ravenbeak. So they're kind of a species in decline. Did I ever read something that the Chozo, like, left for another galaxy? I don't remember if that was true or if that was a thing. But regardless, the Chozo, they're around. They're just not involved. There used to be, I think in lore-wise, there was a time when they were just all around, all over, and then they had, like, a whole thing going on, and then they just kind of receded and stepped back, which makes sense. They're not just one big Chozo race. There's different groups of Chozo. But it seems like if there are any Chozo left, they're just in the fringes, not around, hiding out, or maybe even another part of space entirely. But hold on, I'm gonna check how long this is. All right, looks like I've been going for an hour and a half. I got 30 minutes before I hit the 2-hour limit, and it won't let me post anything longer, and then I'll have to split it up. So let me keep going. Actually, let me get a drink. Hold on. Grabbing a drink. Pour it myself. That's really good. Anyway. Let's see, what's next on my sticky note list? I guess I could talk about the suits at some point. I do wish that Metroid Prime Remastered had put the fusion suit. Why? Why is there no fusion suit in Metroid Prime Remastered? Also, why are all Metroid amiibo so dumb? Why? Every single Metroid amiibo locks something crucial or like game changing or tone changing behind it. Between locking the hardest difficulty in Samus Returns, but the stuff that the amiibos do in Prime 4, what the Metroid amiibo, what that does too, it's like they just can't help themselves. They just can't help themselves. Anyway, and it's always Metroid amiibo too, not Donkey Kong amiibo, not. But I really wish that the fusion suit was back in Prime Remastered. They took it out, and it made me very sad because I like seeing that in again. It's almost realizing the dream of getting Metroid Fusion in 3D that I talked about in the first half. It's almost that. And it was taken away. Taken away, and it makes me sad. Anyway, let's see. What do I have? I can take Chozo presence in the story off. Excuse me. Remove that. Delete. Okay. I guess next I'll talk about Prime Hunters. Yeah, next is Prime Hunters. Now, Prime Hunters is really interesting because Prime Hunters is what I really feel like. Prime Hunters is definitely what I feel like is the proper evolution of how to expand Metroid properly. How to expand it properly, the proper evolution. There was something I wanted to point out that I thought was really, really interesting. Is that each of the hunters in Metroid Prime Hunters almost act as a thematic mirror to Samus. And I wrote it down. The hunter Spire, a living echo of something that Samus has dealt with her entire life. The tragedy of being the last of your kind. The final Diamant, the species wiped out by time and catastrophe. Survivor carrying the weight of extinction. Someone who wanders the galaxy searching for answers. Samus is the last living human raised by the Chozo. Homeworld was destroyed. Shaped by a culture that no longer exists, a wanderer carrying the legacy of an extinct civilization. Carrying the burden of a vanished people. He's also a mirror of Samus's relationship to extinct species. The last torchbearer of a vanished people. Of course, when the game came out at the time, this was before, all these other Chozo groups are revealed. I think most people at the time just kind of assumed that the Chozo were wiped out, so, the other one is Candon, the mirror of Samus as a mutant bioweapon. A grotesque version of something Samus rarely confronts directly. She is in many ways a living weapon engineered by science. A mirror of Samus is a mutant bioweapon. A biologically engineered being. Forced mutation, experimental augmentation. Candon embodies forced mutation, experimental augmentation, instability, loss of self through biological modification, a body reshaped into a tool of war. Samus too is infused with Chozo DNA, enhanced, biologically altered to survive impossible environments, a fusion of human, alien, and technology. Someone whose body is full of modifications, but Samus retains her humanity. Her enhancements are harmonious, not chaotic, at least until Dread, and she controls her power instead of being consumed by it. Candon is a nightmare version of Samus, what she could have become. The bioweapon nature, stripped of soul and stability. And then with Spire, both him and her, they wander the galaxy with no home. They carry on their legacy. Homeworld gone. Who else do we have here? Who else? There are some really extra good ones as well. Let's see, who is next? Silux. At least before Prime 4 made him a weird, whiny baby who just kind of yells and rages a lot. They made him so uncool. Prime 4. Silux is so dull, and not only is he dull, he goes into the negative. He's just not cool anymore. at all. Unlocking his... I see you. I'm coming for you, Ooh, I'm a boogeyman. Be quiet. Be quiet, Samus! What did they do? Bring me that weapon! Ugh. Anyway. Silex, at least then, Samus's distrust and independence weaponized. Silex represents that part of Samus that doesn't trust the Federation, operates outside the system, relies on personal convictions over orders, is willing to go rogue to accomplish goals. Silex is what Samus could become if her independence turned into obsession. He's the anti-Samus in the sense of ideology, not power. And that also goes for his abilities and his suit. He has the ability to absorb technology and adapt it into his suit. He is the Federation's answer to Samus's suit. It shows that at some point they were collecting data on Samus's suit. And they recreated the ability to have an adaptable suit that actually... that's basically what he's doing in Prime 4, which is really dumb. That should be accessory to his goal, an extra ability that he has, not the whole point of his plan. What? He's just going around farming the da 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 da. That's what he's doing the entire time. Bum 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 bum. Bum 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 bum. Whatever the sound is that Prime does. That's what he's doing. Anyway, he's the anti-Samus in the sense of ideology, not power. If her independence turned into obsession. Noxus, Samus's discipline and moral code taken to rigidity. Noxus embodies honor, restraint, discipline, and strict personal code. Samus has a moral compass, but she's flexible when survival demands it, or when the situation calls for it. Noxus is what Samus would become if she became too rigid, too bound by inflexible principle in order to adapt. He's the ascetic warrior version of her. He's basically the... How do I put that? He's like the... Master Ericus from Kingdom Hearts Birth by Sleep. You know, we have to wipe... Have you fallen to the darkness? None of your concern. You know, that kind of thing. Where the darkness must be wiped out. You know, I'm failing at that Mark Hamill voice. But, he's kind of got that version going on where he's the extremist, basically. Where, you know, Ericus, for him, everything just becomes darkness if it's not his exact idea of what light is, if that makes sense. It's not that what he's talking about is darkness all the time. It's just like, you showed hesitation. You had a negative emotion. Evil! Kill! And then, he tries to destroy it. He's like that kind of person, where it's like, if you're angry or upset, that's bad and it's always bad. You know, that kind of thing. That's kind of what it's kind of what Noxus has going on. Spire. Sam, and I think I already mentioned Spire. But again, he another thing that he has, he's durable, relentless, physically imposing, shaped by a harsh environment, reflecting Samus's survivor instinct, the part of her that endures impossible conditions and keeps going. Her physical tenacity. Weevil, Samus's technological integration pushed into body horror. The fusion of biology and technology, the cost of war, the loss of self through augmentation. Samus also is enhanced, but she retains her humanity. Weevil is what would she become if she lost that balance? What if the suit consumed her version? Trace, Samus's predatory instinct stripped of morality. Stealthy, cunning, lethal, opportunistic, Samus's hunter side, but stripped and devoid of the ethics. Embrace the pure hunter, predator role, cold, efficient killer. Candon, Samus's adaptability turned into instability. Candon is experimental, unstable, unpredictable, constantly mutating. He's the chaotic version of Samus's adaptability. Samus adapts with precision, Candon adapts with volatility. He's the mutation without control mirror. And I wrote down a note. This is why it feels like a proper development or an expansion of Metroid. It deepens Samus by showing what she isn't and what she could be. It expands the universe without diluting her myth. It evolves the series without breaking its tone. It adds rivals without turning the story into space opera. And I wrote down like a whole bunch of things. I guess this is the part where I can get into it. Let's see. That's for Prime 4. That's talking about Metroid's pacing philosophy. That's talking about... Let me think. Do I want to pause here again today? I think I've almost hit 2 hours just going through Prime 3, and now I'm into Prime Hunters. Let me think for a second. Let me check. You know what? I'll just talk about Hunters for now and get into the other things that I wrote for that later. Metroid Prime Hunters. Let's see. I had like a whole discussion with Copilot because I got no one else to talk about these things to. Expanding the Metroid universe properly. You were arguing that was me arguing, not really arguing. I was just stating that expansion isn't inherently good. People say I like when the world evolves, but often only praise expansions that are poorly executed, break the tone, introduce lore that contradicts the series' emotional core, or feel like fan fiction with a budget. Metroid Prime Hunters is the counterexample. It expanded the universe successfully because it introduced new hunters with distinct cultures and motives. It expanded the idea of galactic conflict without overriding Samus. It kept the tone, isolation, danger, and mystery, and it added to the universe without redefining it. It was expansion with discipline. Good expansion deepens the universe without breaking what makes Metroid Metroid. It adds layers, not contradictions. It preserves the emotional pillars. Metroid's core identity, emotional identity, includes isolation, mystery, ancient ruins, alien hostility, quiet tension, personal agency. Samus as a mythic lone figure. Good expansions respect these pillars, even when adding new elements. Metroid Prime Hunters introduced new hunters, expanded galactic culture, even referenced new factions, showed a wider universe, but it never broke the feeling of being alone, outmatched, and deep in hostile alien territory. It expanded the universe outward without flattening the tone. It adds new ideas that feel like they belong. Good expansion feels like, oh, of course this exists in the Metroid universe. This deepens the lore without changing the tone. This feels alien, ancient, dangerous, mysterious. It's additive, not trying to be corrective. It keeps Samus at the center of the universe's mythology. It doesn't turn Samus into a soldier, a cog, a background character in a bigger political drama, a special operative. It keeps her as a lone hunter, the mythic figure, the one who uncovers truths that others can't, the person who stands between the galaxy and annihilation. The universe expands around her, not over her. Good expansion keeps the galaxy sparsely charted, ancient, full of ruins, full of secrets, full of things civilization hasn't discovered or touched. It doesn't over-explain, over-populate, or over-politicize. Bad expansion contradicts the emotional identity of Metroid. It adds noise, not depth. It introduces elements that break the tone. It feels like this belongs in a different franchise. This is too structured, too political, too busy. This removes the mystery instead of deepening it. It makes the universe too big, too open, too explained. And actually, I'm going to get into that later when I talk about the Galactic Federation more. It demotes Samus. Bad expansion turns Samus into a special ops soldier, a Federation asset, a pawn in a larger conflict. This destroys her mythic quality. She's compelling because she's outside the system, a lone force of nature, the galaxy's first and last line of defense to a disaster they don't even know is coming, the one who goes where no one else can. Bad expansion makes her feel replaceable. Yeah, it adds rivals without turning the story into a space opera. Let's see. There we go. Why Hunters succeeds where other expansions fail, because it understands the difference between expanding the universe and changing the genre. Hunters expands, it doesn't transform Metroid into something else. It respects tone, atmosphere, isolation, mystery, Samus's mythic role. The ancient, dangerous galaxy. It adds without replacing, it evolves without erasing. Let's see, there's a specific part, new species, new technologies, new ruins, new mysteries, but it didn't over-explain them. It didn't turn it into a codex-heavy space opera. It didn't flatten the unknown. I want to see what I'm looking for. Okay, I think I found it. Prime Hunters is the counterexample that blows up. I like when the series expands and evolves defense, because it shows exactly what good expansion looks like in Metroid. It didn't just expand the universe, it expanded it in a way that reinforced the series' identity instead of overriding it. It expanded the universe outward, not upward. It didn't introduce galactic politics, military hierarchies, Federation fleets, map space, a giant war. Instead, it expanded the universe horizontally. New planets, new cultures, new hunters, new technologies, new mysteries. It made the galaxy feel bigger, not busier, and that's the key difference. And I really want to discuss that because Prime Hunters is a really good example of what Prime 1 and 2 do very well, where Samus just answers a call or finds something, stumbles upon a situation, but unlike Prime 1, closer to Prime 2, it just escalates to a degree that, she wasn't prepared for at the start, that she didn't think. It's more of like a routine check. It starts off small, and then suddenly everything escalates into like a battle for the Olympic system and this ancient weapon and trying to Gorea, trying to defeat this alien creature that again wiped out this civilization. But it's a self-contained story that kind of evolves naturally as more conflicts get introduced, and there's the introduction of, a very dangerous super weapon at the core of it all. But Samus just kind of stumbled into it, and it just kind of turned into a whole situation where she ended up saving everyone. And let me see here. It preserved the tone, isolation, mystery, and hostility. Even though other hunters are encountered, the game still feels lonely, dangerous, atmospheric, alien, unpredictable. The other hunters don't break the tone, they enhance it. They're not NPCs giving you quests, they're not allies, they're not part of a military structure, they're rivals, predators, threats. They reinforce Samus's role as a lone hunter in the galaxy. And that's something that I thought was interesting, is that one thing about that really adds to the hunters in Metroid Prime Hunters is the fact that they're not your friends. If you see one, you have to be scared that you're going to run into one, because they'll try to kill you. They're fellow hunters, fellow predators. They have their own sets of skills. They will kill you on sight if they run into you. They're not there to be your friends. You have to be worried that you're even going to run into them. They add to the tension of the world. And I'll talk about this in part 4 probably, is tension in Metroid. But Hunters does that with, I guess it's kind of like what the SAX, not exactly what the SAX does or the EMI, but again, it's a threat looming out there in the world, and you have to be worried that you're going to run into them. They are going to hunt you as much as you're hunting them. They have their own skills. Running into them is not happy time. It's dangerous. It's it's a threat. If you should you see one of the other hunters. And there's a difference between them being like Prime 3, kind of tacky action figure-y possessed supervillains. That's what those hunters turn into. Super gimmicky. But Prime Hunters really manages to make them feel a lot more grounded. Yes, they have their unique technologies and abilities, but it's more rooted in something similar to what Samus has. They don't feel like they got superpowers. It feels like they have adaptations, they have skills, they have technology, they have things that they've done to become the skilled fighters that they have grown into. Let me see. This is where it added characters without breaking Samus's mythic status. This is where Hunters shines. The new Hunters have their own motives, they have their own cultures, they have their own fighting styles. They feel like legends in their own right, but none of them overshadow Samus. None of them turn her into a soldier or a cog in a larger machine. Instead, they contextualize her. She's not the only hunter in the galaxy. But they're a chance for her to prove that she's the most capable, that she's the best, and that she survives what others can't through her effort, through her struggle, through coming into conflict with them and fighting them, and out-hunting them and out-maneuvering them. And of course, you as the player, this is what I want to get into later, is that Samus, even in Dread, she's not some perfect, I know the term gets thrown around a lot, Mary Sue type character. She opens up the game by losing. She can barely control her own powers. She's constantly having to run from the EMMI. She can't defeat them until the end of the game. You are literally playing through her struggles, trying to get stronger. Like, you gotta, like, her story is your gameplay, in addition to the cutscenes. Anyway. Strengthens her myth, not weakens it. It expands the universe without civilizing it. Hunters didn't imply supply lines, reinforcements, political borders, Federation oversight, a galaxy full of bustling civilization. And I'll get to that later when I talk about the Galactic Federation. Instead, it showed remote systems, ancient ruins, derelict structures, hostile environments, forgotten worlds. It kept the galaxy wild, not mapped. That's essential for Metroid. It introduced conflict without turning Metroid into a war story. The conflict in Hunters is personal, competitive, mysterious, contained. It's not a galactic invasion, a political crisis, a military operation. And that's the thing with Metroid stories. When Samus arrives, she's stopping something in its embryonic stage before it can become a galactic invasion, before it becomes a crisis, before it becomes an operation. She's catching something that nobody knows about before it can turn into something that other people will have to get involved and actually start fighting in. But this keeps the stakes intimate, the way Metroid works best. Samus isn't fighting a war. She's navigating a deadly competition in the shadows of ancient ruins against fellow hunters who are skilled as her in many ways, and also hunting her as well. It's pure Metroid. It expanded lore without explaining everything. It added new species, new technologies, new ruins, new mysteries, but didn't over-explain them. It didn't flatten the unknown. And I think this is the part of the notes that I already went through. Yeah, Prime 3's expansion, which went too far into space opera. Fusion's expansion, which worked because it stayed intimate, which I agree with. I really do think Fusion's expansion, I mentioned it before, I do think Fusion was a good evolution for what it was going for. Not every Metroid game should be what Fusion is, but Fusion is really good for foraying into that space at least once. Now, there is something else I want to talk about with Prime Hunters. Well, one thing I think about that's kind of cool about Prime Hunters, it's kind of like a precursor to the modern day, you know, Overwatch, Marvel's rival. You know that those kind of rivals, heroes type shooter. It did that years before those games ever became popular. Like it has like you select your different characters. They have their unique move sets. You go through the game as a hunter. I mainly wanted to address Hunters 4, how it handles expansion properly, and now to address other parts of Hunters. One is it's a very good looking DS game. And it controls actually pretty well, and the multiplayer is fun. The multiplayer with Prime Hunters is pretty fun. I got to test it out at least once, a long time ago, a very 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 long time ago. But I do remember it being fun. I did get a chance to play it through other means later on, and it's still like a very fun game. I can't even really complain. Yeah, it's limited in its capabilities. It is a DS game, a good looking DS game, but still limited nonetheless in its ability to do environments and stuff like that. You know, it looks samey a lot of the time and stuff like that. But what it does pretty well, except for the music. I cannot stand Metroid Prime Hunter's soundtrack. It is the one part of the game that just bothers me to no end. I try to sit through and listen to the sound, even just in game. Man, I really, really dislike Metroid Prime Hunter's soundtrack, even with the game on top of it playing through it. That's another game. Going back to that thing I mentioned last time with Metroid Prime 2 Echoes and getting people to recompose the game, or you know, that idea with Wind Waker, you know, that challenge of recomposing a game. Can we do that for Metroid Prime Hunters? Can we go through and like do a challenge and get people to recompose that game? Like, all the instrument choices bother me. All the themes bother me. It's just like annoying generic synthy noises. It just uses on the same console that can handle Sonic Rush's soundtrack and even do like Kingdom Hearts Recoded and 358 over 2 days. Like, nah. Listening to Prime Hunter's soundtrack depresses me immensely. Maybe I shouldn't use the word depresses. I've been through actual depression. That's not depresses. That's just disappoints. It disappoints me. It just deflates me. It gets me down every time I hear Prime Hunter's soundtrack. It's just so generic and forgettable. And I just don't want to hear it. So please, this is the last thing I'll say. Prime Hunters is such a good idea. And some of that idea I'm going to bring into an idea I have with Prime 4. But I'm going to go ahead and end here today because I've gone on long enough. But please, can we get people to completely rescore Metroid Prime Hunters? Just make new, unique themes for everybody. That would be wonderful. Alright, I'm going to stop here for today. I've gone on long enough.